Thank you so much for having us. Thank you so much for inviting us. Thank you to Professor Sandu, who is also one of our colleagues in the association you mentioned. Both myself and Mihail are members of the association. But I'm not going to speak much about the association right now. And also, I want to ask you whether this 40 minutes is allocated to the speeches, presentations, or also include if there is a Q&A session. Is this included in the 40 minutes, the question and answers?
Yes, the questions and answers are also included in this timing.
But
okay, so
if there will be many questions or many commentaries, idea that will want to be shared, we will expand a bit the time and be sure of that.
The last session, but not the least, we can continue the discussions, but not unlimited, right?
I mean, yes, but if people might be tired after such a long range of debates, so they might choose to send their questions in writing, which is also fine. We will find time to answer in detail to each one of them. But now I don't want to take much of Mihail's time, because he's actually the main he's the key player here. I came here to just speak a little bit about this project, which is one of the dearest projects of mine, the founding of this master's program, the difficulties we encountered, and there's still possible threats and hindrances to the profession of philosophical counselor in this country. Of some of them, Professor Sandu is also aware. We have discussions about that within the association. But when we started this in Timisoara, the master's program, the attitude was almost unanimously skeptical. I mean, why this now in a country where this is the last thing we were missing? Philosophical counseling in a country which was still dragging its feet through reform, carrying burdens from the past. We are still dealing with past things. We haven't yet concluded some processes from the past. And why this? Philosophy is something else. Philosophy is academic. We shouldn't focus on another side of philosophy, and so on. And on top of everything, the idea of having the program in English was, adding, like the English people say, adding pain to injury, because they said, oh, I mean, why in English? For God's sake, people will never come to your program if it's in English. Is it not enough that it's a strange subject to most people? So now you want it in English. But the idea was, I was stubborn enough to carry on. The idea was, we did not have enough trainers qualified in this country to actually provide the necessary skills and qualifications. That was one reason. My dream was also to have international students coming to the program. But my first idea was, let's have international trainers come to the program, and also give our students chances to profess internationally if they wish to do so. So this is how the program started in 2015. It started maybe a bit timidly, we can say. But it was a very good first lot of students who graduated, and they started working alongside the teachers, the lecturers, to actually establish themselves as a professional group and as possible alternatives to the existing types of counseling, coaching, and other things Mihail will specify a little bit later. So there was this intense effort between 2015 and 2017, when the first lot were working as students, were active students, to actually demonstrate that there is a niche which is not occupied on the market, and that philosophy has social utility, which has not been fulfilled in recent times. That philosophy had lost some of this social utility for which it was actually invented. This was one of the arguments we had, and that becoming academic would not. Of course, it's great that philosophy went a long way in towards academic performance, towards the heights of subtle conceptual development and towards tremendous achievements in various fields of theoretical philosophy, from ontology, metaphysics, to philosophy of science and logic and epistemology, and all these subfields of philosophy. But that does not mean that there was no space left for philosophy as paresia, philosophy as practical wisdom, as phronesis, and to bring philosophy back into the service of the common man. So we did a lot of sessions to demonstrate to the public the utility of philosophy. We engaged, and this was a lot of work which was done totally voluntarily by the lecturers and by the students on the side of the core program, using also the tremendous help we got from our associate lecturers from abroad, who actually also more or less voluntarily train students, broadcast their work on their social media channels, made as all they could to actually disseminate the importance and the prospects of this work, the work of like counseling and consultancy in various fields, from ethics to organizational and children class or school work. So all based on philosophy, as an alternative to the work done so far based on psychology, on drama, on art, on other things, which are also welcome, but philosophy's space was still unoccupied and still is to a large extent. So one of the fields which we developed was the philosophy applied in organizational consultation. Apart from what is always would think that philosophical counseling addresses mainly and mostly individual counseling, like one-to-one, following the model of psychotherapy, following the famous Freudian couch, that there will be one counselee and one counselor, and this is what it's all about. No, there are many other directions which philosophy allows to the practitioners and to the clients and to the society, groups of adults, groups of children, companies, and so on. So one of the directions which now had been fruitfully ended up in projects like dissertations and then in company work like Mihail's, have already produced results, and Mihail will detail a little bit more about that. So we are in full expansion. This year is probably better than ever with the pandemic has also, apart from producing so many crises at all sorts of levels, also had some sort of advantage that we could gather a large international group of students and lecturers who didn't have to travel in order to be together in a very compact and cohesive class, which is, these guys are not missing classes, by the way. This is exceptional. I know, you know what I'm talking about. Everybody is there every single week, every single day when they have classes. And that is fairly unusual even in other countries, not only here. So I would like to invite Mihail to talk about his own experience and what did he do with philosophy after going through psychology and theology as undergraduate studies. Mihail?
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the opportunity to talk today. I will try to limit my intervention to 20 minutes, so to leave time for the questions. What I will present today, it's mostly the presentation that I used for my dissertation, and added the later practical stuff from this approach. So with your permission, I will start the presentation. Because we are addressing to companies, you have to be persuasive. And in order for them to pay attention, you have to talk about them, not about you and how special are you. So I try to build my entire approach as an argument, as a series of arguments for them to at least to listen to what I have to say. This is how the power of critical thinking was unleashed after 2000 years in Timisoara. So I came up with something that they already knew in the companies: the coaching, the training, the philosophical, the psychological counseling, and the other stuff that they already paid for. This is trainings for customer care, for communication skills, and skills that they were training to improve to: the active listening, the conflict management, and all the workshops that promise in companies to help you. So again, what do they have in common? It's simple. They have two things in common. All of them use good questioning skills. It's a whole theory, depends on the approach that you are using with powerful question, with solution questions, with objective focused questions, but they are questions. There are no bad questions, only bad answers. And the second thing they have in common, all of these approaches that I talked to you before, it's they all have a purpose, a common purpose: to lead us to clarity and to help us define our values and our life meaning. Again, if you do these three things, then you'll get better communication, better customer care. You'll be a better active listening person. You resolve a lot of conflicts. This is my approach for the companies to listen to me. What were the objectives of my paper? It's to bring back this philosophy, this practical part, to those who needed it, and thus improving their quality of life. Then to put this on the same pedestal, the philosophical counseling, as the other areas that are recognized and they are paid for in companies, as the training and the consultancy. And fourth, to invent or to rebrand this philosophy for companies. Because as we learn in the MA in Timisoara, there are some sub-branches, like philosophy for children, like philosophy in prisons, like philosophy in communities. But I haven't found a lot of written materials, published work on philosophy in companies. So I try to do something in this direction. What did I measure in my intervention? Because I had more interventions in 3 companies that allowed me to practice on them and to give them questionnaires. I looked for more things to see if something changed after my intervention using philosophical counseling. What kind of changes it did. And for this, I looked at the average scores before and after. And I also used a control group in each company to check if they have any change without any intervention. Again, if there are some differences in the between the companies, there are some differences between the genders and the ages of the persons that participated. And if it's a correlation at all between the post and the after scores and the recommendation that they have. And I also used some measuring tools that are really useful and really appreciated in the corporate world. But in order to put my foot in the door, for them to listen to me, I had to rebrand the philosophical counseling and consultancy. Because as our friend from Serbia, Alexander Fatic, said, money runs away from philosophy. So don't use this approach if you want people to pay attention. So I had to give it a new code. And by looking at the names very frequently used in the trainings that had to do with philosophical stuff, the best search had the critical thinking, or argumentation, or conflict resolution. So I try to put these methods as a path to go to those goals. And this was my first mistake, because these 3 companies agreed for me to do this without any hesitation. And this was my, my ace. This was my my foot in the door without any equivoque, but also it was my downfall at the end. As you will see at the end, the score wasn't positively or strongly recommending this approach. And this happened because these companies said yes right away for me to do this philosophical practice on them, because they already had a lot of thought in that direction. All of these companies that I tested on already have their company values defined, and they were living by their values. They had a mission defined and everything else. So I wrapped a really pretty package for the employees to accept, because it's one thing for the CEO to say, okay, you can come over and you can try this stuff on my employees. It's another thing for the persons to volunteer to participate to a training when it's a full season and you don't have time to do your own job, otherwise participate in a study. So using the different, persons inside that I call sponsors, that advocated for me, and packaging the philosophical counseling in a workshop for communication and argumentation, people said yes. And I had some good figures of people. I targeted 500 people, more or less, in the 3 companies. But in the end, I got the participation of 130. Because I had to have in consideration the people that participated in the workshops and the ones that didn't participate, but still they filled in the questionnaires before and after in order to have a control group. I thank them all. They were excited by the intervention, but statistically, using these two questionnaires, the orientation to life questionnaire, SOC 13, and the meaning in life questionnaire, before and after the intervention, we didn't see a really big difference in the figures. Because as we all know, if you are already at the highest point at your development, it's really hard to change a little bit more, to be a little bit better. And this was the downfall. But I got some other things. As I told you before, I used a score that's used a lot in corporate environment. A score that predicts better the success of a company than the profit, than the customer service feedback. Is a net promoter score. How much the persons that know you, that work with you, are willing to recommend you to somebody they know, to a friend or to a family member. And this was a positive score. It's not a big score, but it's positive. Why? Because these scores can be negative. So what's above 0, it's a good score. It can be -7, -5. And this was the most encouraging result that I got. And with this, I started to apply whenever I had the chance. But not before having an overview. Who is our competition in the corporate world? Because companies are paying for trainings, they are paying for mentors to come and help them, they are paying for consultants, and they are paying for coaching. And our job is to convince them to pay also for philosophical counseling. And I try to be as clear as possible. Where are we between these all approaches? And as you can see, we are the closest to coaching from all the other trainings. From what we learned in the MA in Timisoara, we learned that I will dare to say there are two main approaches in philosophical counseling. One that goes a lot towards teaching, and this is the approach of Lumen, and the other one that goes a lot towards consulting, and that's Oscar's Benefier approach. What I try to do in companies, I adapted the two of them, find the middle way between them, and added something from training. That's the debriefing part. When you don't allow the space for the person to make up their own mind, but lead them towards these conclusions. So, before getting any money, my first goal was to make popular this approach. So in the last 2 years, all the things I did were pro bono. And I tried it in business meetings, in business clubs, and the feedbacks were really good. Then I tested this approach at conferences and talked to people about this approach, and they were really mesmerized, because it's not something they hear every day. Think about people that are mostly CEOs and in the HR department. They know all the theory about HR, about coach, about training, about team building, or team drinking, as they say. But you don't get the chance to hear about this philosophical part that gains a lot of field, luckily. A lot of big CEOs, about a lot of business writers go back to Socrates and the Stoics and bring them back in fashion in the business world. And I'm happy about it. I'm really happy. But this was the period before the pandemic, when we could meet each other. These were the good times. But then the online helped us to be more productive using a computer. If somebody is present at a business meeting offline, you can use their pictures. If you don't get all the acceptance for all the participants to use their pictures in online, you cannot use them. That's why I blurred the images. But my approach was not to sell only as a unique selling point the philosophical counseling, but combine it with something else that people already know. With ICF certified coaching approaches, and brought to those approaches the advantages of using the critical thinking and the argumentations and the hypotheses and the fallacies. Because what these coaching approaches do, they come up with good questions. What I did extra using philosophical counseling was to interpret their answers from this point of view, from the philosophical, logical point of view. And next, because doing pro bono only in companies won't attract attention and don't give you a good grip, I also practice this in NGOs and in schools. Because the last 2 years after finishing the master's, my entire energy went into making people aware about this approach without asking any money for it. Because it's the main goal of a philosopher, philosophical counseling, to awaken in the other people the inner philosopher. And it's easier to do this in schools, because children don't have this many fixed ideas as us grown-ups. And they are really open and really excited to be able to speak their own mind, especially in the NGOs that are involved in education. They are really open to these ideas that philosophical counseling is bringing. Lucky for them, but not for us, I don't have any photos here. So I managed to do this in 19 minutes. I would rather go to the questions if there are any. Thank you for your attention. These are the feedbacks, by the way, if you are curious from the corporate environment.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for this presentation and for your courage to promote philosophical counseling in Romania, because I encounter myself very large opposition on this practice in university, in business, and in another environment. But now, it's a lot of merit of your master program. In Romania is better, much better known, the philosophical practice. Of course, publication of Lumarinov's work did have an effect, and contribution of other philosophical practitioners and their workshop and their conferences. But this is very difficult, and it's very important to have such practice, and I congratulate you for this, and it's very important to have this association and to have that master degree programs. Just questions about your approach. You say you mixed the two approach of Oscar Brenifer and of Lumarinov. For me, the two approaches are very, very different. Because Lumarinov is more rational, but involve emotions. But in my opinion, Oscar Brenifer is a radical rationalist. How did you manage these two different approach of philosophical counseling in order to give your own program of philosophical practice in organization?
First of all, in order for a company to give you money and to call you back the second time, you need a positive feedback from the participants. When you do personal counseling, as mostly Lumarinov and Oscar Brenifer do, or group company, who's present there also is paying for that. Mm-hmm. But in companies, who's present there most of the time doesn't pay for that. The company does. The CEO does. The HR department is paying for that. And then at the end, they want to see a feedback. Was it helpful, or is good, or was not good? So that's why you have to pay attention to people's emotions, like Lumarinov does, but also force them to realize something painful, like Oscar does. So you have to really careful manage their emotions and calm them in order to help them think critically about themselves. By checking first if they are ready to do that.
I was intrigued a bit about your distinction between emotions and reason. And your presentation led me to the metaphor of psychologist Jonathan Haidt. I'm sure you know it actually, about the elephant and the rider. He introduces a useful analogy for thinking about behavior changing, and your intervention as philosophical practitioner goes to change your behavior within organization. And Haidt argues that we have two sides, an emotional one, which is represented by an elephant, think of an elephant, a big one, and an analytical one, the reasoning, rational side, which is a rider. And somehow the rider controls the elephant. And I was interested about the feedback you said that participants within an organization gave you. Are they familiar with the idea of how they can really manage their own state of mind or emotions? Because before we start analyzing our thoughts, we first are, let's say, manipulated by our emotions.
I must add that Anna is a follower of Oscar Brenifer.
Okay, thank you for the... actually, these same things the philosophers said before any psychologist. Between the... Not the final struggle between rationality and emotion. You cannot denounce any of them. They are both important. Emotion. We need emotions to get out of the bed in the morning. To
actually,
get
they are co-working.
We need the emotions. Mm-hmm. We need them. They are not good or bad. They are movement. They are energy. The emotions. And we can think rationally, not if we refute the emotions, but acknowledge them. So this duality, that one is good, one is bad, you can have one without the other, it's a false problem. It's a forced false problem. It's not a real problem. You have to have emotion in order to be alive, You have to be scared not to die in order to do something to live.
And here comes in the neuroscience, where it explains each part of the brain that helps you understand better the chemistry of your entire mechanism. Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm trying to do. Imagine the emotions a little bit. So do a little emotional intelligence training at the beginning. Make them aware of their emotions, how this can influence them, how this influenced them before and can influence them after, and then have a overview, bird's eye view. I know, the fly on the wall or meta thinking perspective about this emotion and how this affects your thinking.
Another part of our work in philosophical consultation that we do not very much consultation, but we did, and it's part of ethical training and ethical program. Did you have experience in training with the corporation for establish their own ethical policy, for example, to conduct such inquiry? What are the values, a value inquiry in the company, and then to make them own philosophical philosophy of their own company?
I was a participant. When my company that I work for in 14 years now, defined its values, I was here. We did it together. Mm-hmm. It's a really, easy workshop to do for any company. It's better or easier or faster to do with the help of a philosopher, but you can do it by yourself. Gather all the employees, the ones that have managing positions, each write on a paper their own 5 values. And if there are 30 people, put 5 people at the table. And from each table, extract only 5 that are common to those 5 people. And from all the tables, remain with 5 or 3 or 6, how many you want. And we went through this process together. I wasn't a facilitator back then. I was a participant, but I saw the pain of being forced to denounce from your 4 values, 3 of them.
And how your company managed to manage to go together the organizational values, organizational culture, with ethics that are imposed to them in order to be appreciated in the community or something? How they manage their own values of the personnel with the organizational? Because we think that is an imperialism of value from the public space to private. How you can manage in the corporation?
You used a word that was really, a negative. How the company imposed the values. It didn't impose anything. We all selected what are our values, our common values back then. And then the people that came after that were selected if they had some of these values in common with us. The ones that didn't have them just left, or they were pushed out by the group.
So it's
because the short answer is company culture. The company culture is said by the good friend of ours, a trainer, that it's the sum of behaviors that you permit or don't punish. So if somebody is acting contrary to our values, the group will punish it. If it doesn't, they will change.
Okay. It's interesting. We did have a research in our area, and we did publish this. We really observe that is an imperialism of value from public space to the private one. Many people import the public value in their own life, and this is an important objective for philosophical counseling. I think to cope with my own value and to the society value. In ethic domain is where we did this research. It's really important for people to understand the values they have to use in social practice, because it's a society's norm and their own private values. For example, values that come from traditional family, because we have the previous workshop on traditional family. They may be approaching a patriarchal style in their own family and their own value, but they have to be non-discriminatory in the work environment. How people can adjust their own value to the society's value, or they have double standards in private life? How do you counsel this if you have encountered this problem? In corporation,
when we have this problem, and we had it, we act differently. People wear masks. You have a role as an employee and a role as a family member. As a family, in the role of the family member, you are a convinced patriarch. But in the role of employee, if your boss it's a superb, very professional woman, that person is your boss. Doesn't matter if she's a woman or a guy. It's your boss, and you look up to that person, because that person has brought you and helped you grow, and by her actions, you have a big salary, because together you are doing a good job. So it's a difference of roles, because we have values, we have principles in life, but we don't all the time use the same principle or the same value to take different decisions. We juggle with which in this situation is the main value that I'm going to use to take this decision. Because you don't have only one value in life, only one principle. You have at least 2 or 3. But never one of them is only the first one. It's a dynamic. So they're not, they're not living a double life. Your question was something, or double standards. They're only dynamic. They're adapting. I cannot afford, from the role of employee in a company that I like working, and I like to bring my ego from the family role, or from the church role. I don't know.
Thank you. Thank
you for the questions. Really provoking. I like it. I want more.
Want to ask questions, because we monopolized the discussion. Please, other participants, to ask questions if there are questions. Well,
hopefully they will be.
Hopefully.
I don't see any questions in Facebook so far. I tried to steer up the... if you want people to come in comment with questions, we should approach, I don't know, something really, some hot topics like vaccination, yes or no, or something like that. And then we'll get a lot of comments.
You have to say outrageous things, Mihail.
Yeah. And this way I will go to Oscar's approach to make people pay attention.
Yes.
And to arouse their emotions to be less rational. To show them afterwards, you're not rational. Yeah, but you're not. I hope he's listening.
If he's not listening, you will be able to discuss better on Sunday, on 30 of May, And then it will be the plenary session of his presentation. And if not, you will have plenty of time to discuss it in the virtual online open session, because we will have a section dedicated to such discussions during the Congress. Yes, thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your ideas. Thank you for your manner of presentation, because I really like the way you are talking and the way you are presenting each idea. For the moment, if there are no other questions, I think we can end this session.
If no more questions, I just have to thank.
You had another one.
The participant, because it's important for this Congress, and it's important for philosophical practice movement in Romania to have this meeting and to promote in this way this practice, and it's important, I think, at least. And thank you again for being here with us and for speaking about what philosophical practice is and what philosophical practice could be and could help the business, the society in general, of education and so on. Thank you very much again, Professor Lobont, and our distinguished colleagues in Philosophical Practitioner Association. Thank you again.
Thank you for having us.